Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Level Up Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, James Lee, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Christie Stukenholtz, who is the CEO and co-founder of Senior Care Finder. It's an organization that helps families like hers that went through this process to find senior care options. And I love her story. And when she and I were introduced together, we started talking about a lot of things, but we landed on this topic of putting an all-star team together, and that every great organization, every leader is responsible for ultimately putting together a group of people who are going to accomplish something greater than if they were doing it on their own. Team formation, it's such a challenging thing for any leader. So when we started talking through it, I thought this is going to be a really great episode, a really great conversation for the podcast. The conversation that I thought we were going to have and the conversation we actually ended up having, two completely different things. And as you can imagine, the conversation we actually had was so much better than what I thought was going to happen. There are some really amazing gold nuggets that came out of this conversation. It is one of those episodes that I will listen back on myself because there are so many good things that I don't want to miss and I don't want to forget. This episode, among many, probably has more quotable quotes that came from it, so I will try to remember all of those. But for now, I hope that you enjoy this conversation in this episode of Level Up Leadership Podcast. So I wanted to tell you, Christie, that I met your husband at, I forget what conference it was, but where was it? It was in Florida.
It's probably Senior Housing News.
Senior Housing News, that's right. So he was kind enough to come find me and he said, "Hey, Christie told me you were going to be here." And we had a chance to connect. So it's always cool to meet family members of other people that you get to know. And this business has really become a family business in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And what might be interesting as we continue our conversation today is there's a reason that he is the one typically at most of the conferences, and it's because his talent set is much better in that type of environment than mine. So
yeah.
Yes, I did tell him to look out for you. So I'm glad you guys connected.
We did. And, I came up in this field, aging services or senior living, depending on how people look at their own position. But I've been in this work in this field for 16 years, and most of it has been in some type of corporate setting, growing through corporate ranks. But as I've ventured into the businesses I'm in now, it really does feel more family and literal family. There are family members that are kind of working together. And I know that you have a very family-based story of how you got into this specific work. I know this story, but I'd love to hear it again so people listening can hear it. How did you find yourself doing the work that you're doing? Tell us a little bit about it and kind of what brought you in.
You bet, James. So in my former life, I actually was in the talent management, positive psychology, building and assembling all-star teams for big brands all around the world. So that was kind of my former life. And at the time, my husband at the time, Keith, worked in the senior living and care industry. He was there for about a decade, leading all things non-clinical for a large regional provider, and would come home all the time and share all the frustrations that he saw and the great solutions that he had to fix them. And so we had lots of fun, lively dinner conversations, and I wished him luck. And I told him I hope he figured it out and to let me know what happened. But it really wasn't until my dad called and said my grandmother in Seattle, Washington could no longer stay at home, and he asked for my help. And I felt, while I wasn't in the industry, I had Heath and I was a savvy researcher. And I felt like, how hard could this really be? Yeah. And so because I was not familiar with the Seattle area, I got online. I Googled it to try to just come up with a list of our options that we could start with. And there was nowhere I could find on the internet that was transparent, unbiased, and that didn't require me to give all my contact information just to do my research. And so that was frustrating. We had the benefit of being able to fly out there and rent a car and drive from place to place and eventually find a great place for my grandmother. But it was really on that flight home, I looked at my husband, now husband, and said, it was 2015. I said,
Mm.
it's 2015. You can't tell me that this is what everyone is
Yeah.
experiencing when they're looking for care, because if you can't be the one to care for your mom or your grandma, the decision about who is going to
Hmm.
do that big job is a really, really big deal. And he looked at me and said, I've been telling you this. I've been telling you this. And I said, okay, well, now I get it. If there's not a resource out there that can help all of us through this really scary journey, then we have to create it. And so that is where Senior Care Finder was born.
So he was saying, I've been telling you all along for the last 10
Yeah.
years that, yeah.
Yeah.
It does bring to mind, Christy, how many people go through these processes. And I'm surprised to find more and more people in this profession who have a similar story of, I
Mm-hmm.
was a customer in some
Mm-hmm.
capacity, I had a poor experience, and I think I might be able to do it better.
Yeah.
And that's from operators who are running care communities. There are provider partner vendors who support customers directly, or B2B relationships with our industry. But the greater point being, so many people have been uh, you know in the shoes of the customer, literally, and
Mm-hmm.
then thought, maybe I can help other people who are going through this. Why do you think our profession, our industry, has so many of these converting customers to, what, I think I can
Mm-hmm.
do this?
Yeah. Well, I think when it's personal, it matters more,
Hmm.
right? And I also think about the experience of aging, the experience of having a loved one maybe be in a position where they need more help, whether that's in their home or
Hmm.
in a community type setting, is really universal. And I
Yeah.
oftentimes, when I'm doing speaking engagements, I ask the question, if you or someone you know has been through the experience of searching for care for a loved one.
Hmm.
And usually a lot of hands go up. And for the hands that don't go up, I often say, if you haven't experienced this, you
Mm.
will.
Yeah.
And so it is one of those, central universal human experiences that most people don't talk about, right? Unless
Yeah.
you're at my dinner party, you're not talking about the aging experience. And when you go through it, it has a profound impact on you and the people you love so much. And
Yeah.
so I think, when people, that can light a fire when it's really personal and it really matters and it's really close to home. And I think that spurs people like me being one of them to really want to change that experience for future generations and all the
Hmm.
folks that are going to be right behind them in
Yeah.
line.
Yeah. There's a feeling within the industry that passion alone, can drive you to success. But I actually think that the added element of autonomy, agency, for us to be able to
Mm-hmm.
say, well, I have passion and purpose, yes, but I also can control my fate here a little bit within the
Mm-hmm.
business that I've built. I've been on both sides now, where I've been a passionate employee of, somebody else's company, and I've done as good of work as I think I could have gotten to. But there was
Mm-hmm.
always this feeling of like, oh, I got to keep asking permission for the things on the fringes that really feel like innovation. And
Mm-hmm.
but how often do we get permission to do the things that feel daring and, a little bit
Right.
risky? So what are your thoughts when I share that about passion plus autonomy or agency? Has that been your experience?
Well, am fortunate to have had an incredible career leading up to this. My husband
Yeah.
and I both have. And I think, you have too, in the sense that when you have had the opportunity to work for someone else
Hmm.
and experience other cultures and other leadership styles, if you're anything like me, you're kind of taking notes the whole time, right?
Yeah.
You're thinking,
Yeah,
gosh, if
definitely.
I were leading this company, though I would do that thing.
Hmm.
Or on the flip side, if I were leading this company, I would definitely not do that thing because I know how it felt,
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
team member or an employee. And so we've spent, the last decade plus kind of collecting all of these little notes. And so feel in a
Mm.
really fortunate position to be able to say, now I get to put that all into practice.
Yeah.
And Now I got to do it what I believe to be the right way, that puts people first, and that is a game changer. I'm fortunate to have worked for some incredible mentors and leaders
Hmm.
that saw my talent before I ever did, and put me in positions to really excel beyond, ways that
Yeah.
I would ever imagine. But I think that's rare. And I also think it's rare to have the opportunity early in your career, especially to be
Hmm.
a part of an all-star team. And once you've had the opportunity to play a role, it it opens up
Yeah.
all of the doors, right? And you're excited and you want to do it again and you want to set your goal higher. And
Yeah.
so to be in a position to be able to assemble that and get the right, people on the right seats on the bus
Hmm.
is an incredible blessing to me that I get to live out every day.
Yeah. Well, this really is a core topic of when we were introduced. We kept coming back to this theme over and over again, and so that's why I was so excited to have this
Mhm.
conversation with you. Let's dig into team formation, and
Mhm.
there's so many different ways we could go with this. Let's maybe start with what you said earlier about how fortunate we both have been to see other leadership styles, other
Mhm.
organizations. And you're right. I do think about how often I'm taking mental notes and
Mhm.
sometimes literal notes, like a notebook,
Yeah.
taking notes. And I don't know if somebody told me this or if I just kind of adopted this mindset, but I remember consciously having a decision about I'm being paid to learn. This company is paying me to learn the business of senior living.
Yeah.
And I approached every job with that mindset of how lucky am I that they're giving me a paycheck and giving me
Yeah.
free access to everything I could
Education.
possibly learn. Right, exactly. So I've been giving that advice to other people too, that anytime you feel
Mhm.
like you're frustrated with XYZ, change your mindset a little bit of, aren't you so
Yeah.
lucky that they're paying you to learn how do you deal with all of these things.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so when you said what you said a moment ago, I couldn't help but think about that mindset, of learning wherever you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love
um, s-
that.
so let's apply some of that learning now. um,
Yeah.
in your role within your organization, and remind us all, the name of your company is
Yes. Senior
Senior
Care Finder.
Senior Care Finder. So you lead an
Yes.
organization today, and then a little bit of history. How long has Senior Care Finder been in existence, and how many
Hmm.
people work there now?
Yes. So well, in our hearts and minds, since pre 2015, when I went
Yeah,
through that experience and started kind of literally getting out the notebook and drawing out what could this look like and what could
yeah,
this be. We officially formed our business in 2019.
hmm,
And as of today, I would say every year in business, we've doubled the size of our team. So today we
hmm,
have 15
yeah,
and we're growing quite fast.
yeah, yeah. So you've been a part of, I'm sure, intimate, smaller teams, and then probably very large teams.
Hmm.
I have been a part of both. So I've been a part of the largest senior living company, and
Yeah.
literally tens of thousands of employees, and you could meet a new employee every single day and not recycle for a few years.
Yeah.
And then here with Bella Groves, our company, we have, I think, maybe 30 or so people on staff.
Hmm.
And there's a real intimacy to knowing people's stories, at a deeper
Hmm.
level. What's it like for you right now having a team of 15? And I would imagine it feels very close at that stage.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And so this won't surprise you.
Hmm.
So when my husband and I were having this conversation of we've got to do this, we also had to have the conversation of which one of us is
Hmm.
going to be the one to jump in with both feet first.
Right.
And
Mm.
that was a talent conversation for us
Yeah.
of which one of us is best equipped to jump in and execute this vision and assemble the team and operationalize all the things in our minds.
Hmm.
And I was the one that drew that straw. And but it was truly from a place of who has the talent set to do this early on in our business. And
Mm-hmm.
so every time I've had the great fortune of continuing to grow our team and add another seat at the table and kind of figure out the puzzle pieces, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
me thinking about what are the strengths that I don't have?
Yeah.
What are the things that I'm not great at that I could bring someone in who's loves to do those things?
Yeah.
And so I finally feel like I'm living in my lane because I've surrounded myself with really amazing people that are executing on all of these awesome things, contributing to our mission.
Yeah.
Um, and it's so fun. To your point, we do have an office space, and people come work here because they want
Mm-hmm.
to be here,
Yeah.
right? They want to be
Yeah.
able to walk in and give somebody a high five. They want to be able to celebrate the successes. And that's a little rare in the age of remote work that we have
Mm-hmm.
today, but I think it's a core value for us. Not that we don't have remote team members, we definitely do. But to be able to, be together really matters. And it's really setting the stage for our culture and ultimately what it feels like to do business with
Mm-hmm.
in the long run.
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna come back to culture a few times. I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
when we think about putting an all-star team together, there are so many components of it, and I'm sure we'll explore a lot of those components on this conversation. But at the end of the day, I do feel like the group of people you gather together, they are the holders of culture. They create and evolve your culture
Yes.
over time. So we'll come back to that topic a lot. I want to go back to talent. I think
Yeah.
that's a really specific and succinct way to think about um, talent or team development or team formation in a way that it feels practical. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people can anecdotally say, "Hey, get people that you want to work with every day, or people that
Yeah.
uplift you and make you better." But
Which also matters.
practically, which of course, all of that
Yeah.
matters. But for a lot of our left brain colleagues out there,
Mm-hmm.
and I would certainly consider myself at least partially that way, um, having concrete things to, if I were to design, okay, this is what putting an all-star team
Mm-hmm.
requires of me to be able to discern talent, to be able
Mm-hmm.
to discern,
Mm-hmm.
and then other components. I think
Yeah.
that's really interesting that you talk about you and your husband had to have a candid conversation about, um, based out of deep knowing of your own skill sets, what are the things that I'm
Mm-hmm.
good at? What are the things that you're good at? What are the things
Mm-hmm.
I love to do? What are the things you love to do? And then based on that, creating the right role. Is that,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. And, now, so that was the conversation at the dinner table, right?
yeah,
And now it's how does that evolve as you have a team of 15, 30, two
sure,
thousand, right?
yeah,
20,000 at some point. And what's interesting is I have, as I think about our business, there's a lot of big things that need to be accomplished,
mm-hmm,
right? And as I'm recruiting, and which I do every day, right? As I think about it, it's like I'm building our bench of talent, right?
mm-hmm,
I'm building a talent bench of people so that when it's time,
mm,
to plug that person in, I have people ready and excited and wanting to come be a part of this team. But I approach those conversations truly from a place of who are you? Where are you great? What do you love? Versus I have a business development director
mm-hmm,
role that needs to be filled because we're people, right?
yeah,
Like we don't fit in a box. And if I try to fit people in a box, then I'm missing out on a whole bunch of other talents and strengths that they have, that is to our detriment. And so
mm,
being able to understand who is the whole person and how can I fit those puzzle pieces together as we keep growing has really served us, I think, in a way that's not put us in a box,
yeah,
but allowed us to really be lean and mean and get the most out of people when as we're small and growing,
yeah,
right? And one of the questions I ask in every touch base or one-on-one that I have with team members is, what other strengths do you have that you're not using?
mm-hmm,
And that
love
gets
that,
my brain thinking of like, well, maybe they operate in the sales, space, but they're really creative. What if I gave them the opportunity to use their creativity over here? Not only is that going to serve our business, but it's going to help retain them and help, keep them excited because they get to do all the different things that they're good at.
Yeah. I love that. It reminds me of so many times in our profession how we form positions, we form job descriptions of here's, like you said, business development or sales or business office. We have roles and titles in mind and very
Hmm.
functional, things, and then we go look for a person who's willing to do all of those bullet points.
Yeah.
Versus the way that you're talking about it is, can we, through our interview and getting to know people, can we really try to distill the essence of what makes that person
Hmm.
tick? And I really
Yes.
love that question of, do you have other strengths that you're not able to use now? Um,
Hmm.
that's a really interesting. So, let's say you were interviewing me for a business development external sales role,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
I told you, well, actually, one of my strengths is storytelling. I really love storytelling, and I get to do a little bit of that as a business development person. But I would really love the opportunity to tell more stories. So,
Yeah.
if you were given that in an interview, but you have the practical challenge of, I still need to hire a business development person, what
Right.
would you do with
Right.
that set of circumstances, Christy?
Yeah. So one thing that's unique is I'm oftentimes not in a crunch, right? Like
Hmm.
when I'm
That's
talking to
great. Yeah.
people, and when I say I'm interviewing all the time, I spend a considerable amount of my time just talking to people in the community. Great people know other great people, friends and family members of our team members. And so that does put me in a nice position to not feel like I have to put someone in a box, right?
Hmm.
And so what I'm trying to do is like paint the picture, understand like the masterpiece of who you are, James. And I literally in my brain see this giant puzzle,
Yeah.
right? And I'm thinking about what do we need today and what are our needs from a people perspective 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 18 months from now. So I would hear that from you, take notes and remember that. So the next time I'm at a strategic planning meeting and we have all of here's the things that we need, I could say, okay, well, James can do that and that.
Hmm.
He's our guy. Let's go
Hmm.
back to him, and I set that stage when I have those conversations of, I say exactly that, right? We might not be hiring today, but we certainly will be in the coming months. And you're going to be top of mind as we're putting that puzzle together.
Yeah. That's really golden too, Christy. You said earlier that you are always recruiting. Yeah, it's just a mindset, not a functional thing for your company, but it's just like every single person I ever talk to or meet, you're probably evaluating in some way, do
Mm-hmm.
I want to work with this person, in this thing that I'm very passionate about.
Right.
So yeah, I really love that. It's a completely different way to think about building a long-term business based on your clarity of strategy. You hold the
Mm-hmm.
puzzle. That's what you were
Mm-hmm.
saying earlier,
Mm-hmm.
is that you see the whole puzzle pieces and how they're going to fit. And I think what I'm hearing you say is, find the people that are going to put those puzzle pieces together. We'll figure out the role and the job
Yeah.
functions, but
Mm-hmm.
having the right set of um, people that have clarity on their own super talents and skills,
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
probably does help. Do you have a practical or example of somebody on your team that kind of fit that process for you?
Gosh, yeah. So, well, I have a really interesting example. So we had hired an
Hmm.
individual specifically to focus on outside sales
Yeah.
efforts. And so he came in, he was scheduling sales meetings, he was on the sales meetings. This actually happened to be right when I had our second child. So
Yeah.
I got him up and running, and then I was out, and my husband had just started full time here, and he came home and he said, this team member is scheduling like 4 times the amount of meetings as everyone else.
Oh.
And he's like, what if we just rechanneled his energy? What if we channeled his energy to only scheduling the meetings? And then you
Hmm.
have, the other folks that love the storytelling and the,
Right.
relationship building and getting the sale across the finish line take over at that point. And so we had that conversation, and what was holding him back was the compensation element
Hmm.
of sales, right? So we said, well, what if we could create a compensation package that would give you the same amount of earning potential and incentivize you to do the thing that you're really great at and enjoy. And he said, well, yeah, duh, son, sold, let's do it. And so we were able to pivot his role so that he is in his lane, enjoying it so much more. The whole team is benefiting as a result, and everyone wins. And so I think that's a unique thing to have happen. We were able to pivot really quickly. We were able to understand what matters to him, and we were able to reformulate, the role in a way that ultimately served everybody. And I think will ensure he's a team member of ours for the long game.
Yeah, that is really cool. So each time we pull a new thread, Christie, I'm adding more keywords to this puzzle of this conversation. So compensation is the other keyword that came out there. So having an honest assessment of people's talent, having an understanding of people's enjoyment. What do you enjoy doing? So there's things you're talented at, but maybe not necessarily things you enjoy, but you're taking both into consideration. And then the compensation piece, what I love about it, and I can also relate to it, is that you're forming compensation that makes sense relative to how you're contributing to the job, and you're making that decision based on what do you enjoy and are good at.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
exactly.
it sounds simple when we say it.
Right. It's so much harder practically. Yeah.
And so many people aren't doing it this way. And truth be told, not throwing rocks from a glass house here, I get into the repetitive kind of functional mindset sometimes of like, okay, I have this position, I got to get it hired, and there are so many things that pile up on a leader's plate that I think every human being could probably relate to the feeling of, I just need to hire somebody and I need to keep moving on.
And
do
you know
you
what,
ever feel
James?
that? Yeah.
I do. However, I would rather hire the empty seat than make the wrong selection decision, which means I would rather deal with the burn in the short term of not having someone in that role versus bringing on the wrong person and paying for it over and over and over again, in the months to come. It's not worth it. I would say, a short-term solution is just asking that question in your one-on-ones. What other talents do you have that you're not using? What other opportunities do you see in our business that you think we could do better? And you might be able to take a small percentage of those, responsibilities and create a growth plan for people that are currently in your team that is like, wow, I get to do something that's like not even what I ever thought I could do, but it uses this other strength that I have. And I feel really engaged that I get to do that here. And so, that's one thing that you can do, but it is making the wrong hire can be more painful sometimes than not making a hire at all.
Hallelujah. I know. Have you said that before? Have you said, I'd rather hire the empty seat?
Yeah.
You've said it that way. I mean, it's such a quotable quote, Christie. If we're gonna pull out a little 30-second clip to promote this episode, it's gonna be probably that. But it is. I think so many people will be able to relate to that feeling that, and surely we all have the experience of where we met the practical goal of let's hire somebody, and then 30, 60, 90 days later, you're dealing with a bigger mess now because of course, that person didn't work out. You weren't the right fit for them. And you went through all of this dating period. And now you're in a worse position because now you're even further delayed in getting moving in that role.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then you certainly have the emotional toll on the team of, oh gosh, that person didn't work out again.
Right.
So I think that's a really smart but challenging thing for leaders to decide is I'd rather hire the empty seat than the wrong person. But how do you get other people bought in to that when you see the big picture and you realize, okay, in the long term, yes, hire the empty seat versus the wrong person, but there are people next to that empty seat that are frustrated that the seat is empty.
Yeah.
So what do we do when we're leaders in that kind of scenario to, I don't know if getting buy-in is the right next step, but what do we
Yeah.
do in that circumstance? What do you do in that
Well,
situation?
I think it fundamentally comes down to, do you have a real, authentic, positive relationship with the people that work for you or work
Hmm.
beside you?
Hmm.
And I can sit down with someone across from me and tell them the truth, right? Tell them just the way I told you.
Hmm.
And if we are in good relationship and they know that I have their best interests, the business best interests, all, as my first lens for everything, they will understand. Um, Now, if you're not in good relationship with the people around you, they will be discouraged. They won't believe you. They'll be frustrated. But if you can be candid and authentic and say, look, we're growing fast. You love to come to work. I want to make sure that we all continue to love to come to work. And every new person we add on this team is going to shift the dynamic just a little. And we want to make sure that we're thoughtful and doing it right. They understand. They do
Hmm.
understand, even though, and maybe it's an ask from me to say, like, just hold on.
Right.
Like, please hold on. We will get there. I promise I'm thinking about this every single day. And if we are in good relationship, they will hear me and they will understand.
Yeah. I think what I'm oversimplifying with this summary, but what you're saying is good communication and good relationships.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if you have a base of really good, solid relationships with the people who are there, and you're communicating
Hmm.
well, I think it would
Yes.
feel really painful if, like, hey, Christie's not hiring anybody. What's going on?
Right.
Versus, however,
I see
whatever,
you. I hear you. I
exactly,
know. Yeah. Yeah.
right. Um,
Exactly.
the way that I think about that from my seat as someone leading a memory care business with our primary person is the caregiver. So,
Hmm.
out of the 30 or so people that we have on the team, 24 are caregivers.
Yeah.
So the
Hmm.
primary department, if you will, uh,
Yeah.
you know it's something that in our industry, first of all, nobody can agree on what the actual turnover rate or turnover percentage is in the industry. Some
Yeah.
people will claim as low as, oh, ours, average is 35% a year. Others will say 200 to 300% a year is average. And
Yeah.
nobody has a shared methodology or equation that they're
Hmm.
using to calculate it. So let's just, I hate to split the difference, but let's just say, for argument's sake, that turnover in an assisted living in a average community is somewhere between 100 and 150% turnover. So
Hmm.
every year, caregivers are going to turn over at least once, um,
Yeah.
which is difficult for any business. But
Yeah.
so in a business where there's high turnover, the pain of not having a caregiver, an
Hmm.
empty seat, if you will, is
Hmm.
real, and
Hmm.
caregivers are stressed out in the meantime because the work can't go undone in that
Yeah.
period of time. So,
Hmm.
a resident still needs their medications, a resident still needs a shower assistance. So, while the empty seat is there, the other people are going
Hmm.
to have to either pick up the slack or hire agency or other staffing
Right.
solutions to fill the gaps in between. So,
Hmm.
for leaders in my shoes who are looking at this equation, I can almost hear it of like, this sounds good, James and Christie. This sounds really good.
Yeah.
But that just isn't practical here on our end.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
I have some counter arguments to that, but they're really based in what you've already said, which is if you have a really solid relationship with your crew and they
Hmm.
understand, look, we're not going to bring in any Joe Schmo to work next to
Yeah.
you. We need people who love as deeply as you do, who work as hard as you do,
Hmm.
and are part of
Hmm.
our culture here. And I do think that on our team, our caregivers understand that I've never articulated it this way. I will now.
Yeah.
We'd rather have the empty seat than the wrong person. And
Hmm.
that's a sacrifice, we have to be willing to make.
Yeah. And you know what that does is it really levels up their perception of the team that they're on,
Hmm.
to really change that. It's a paradigm shift to
Yeah.
say, no, I was selected to be here.
Right.
We're not going to take just anyone. And I feel honored to be a part of this high performing team that's making a huge impact. The other thing that you think about, James, is what are the other things that matter to people as it relates to their jobs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Pay, sure. Who they're working next to every single day, do they like them, right? Is the energy
Mm-hmm.
good? Do they want to go spend time together? Matters. Who is their leader?
Mm-hmm.
Matters. What's the end goal for all of this? What's the mission or the purpose behind what we're doing? And do I get to do the things that I'm good at and that I enjoy?
Yeah.
And so, a big piece of that as a leader is always thinking about who are the future leaders and who are the other people, because you're one person and I'm one person.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't spend our whole days, as much as I would love to. That's not
Yeah.
realistic. So part of our job is, how do we find those people that can carry forward in the day to day, right? And maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
official or unofficial, but they're going to create the environment that makes people want to stay even when it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's those moments of hardship that really create the bond also.
Mm-hmm.
If you think
Mm-hmm.
about any group of friends, family, work colleagues, the strength of bond that we have between people is usually forged in difficult times.
Yeah.
And like Christy and I got through some tough stuff together. And
Yeah.
so I'm in her corner, she's in my corner. And there's this
Yeah.
feeling of like if you never have challenge, you'll never actually create those deeper bonds
Yeah.
with people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So so I guess the question is, how do you know that when you're hiring somebody that they are your ride or die type of people, right? So we've
Yeah.
got talent, we've got enjoyment, we've got the compensation piece. All of these are
Mm-hmm.
components of kind of bigger culture. What else would you say, if you're looking at practical parts of your all-star team selection process, what other things are you conscious of when you are putting your team together?
Yeah. So I always say I want the person to be as excited
Mm-hmm.
about the opportunity as we are about the person, right?
Yeah.
Like if we're both not running towards each other so excited to make this happen,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe timing's off or they're just not the right
Yeah.
person. And the stars will align. Like you will know when it is the fit. I
Mm-hmm.
also don't just rely on my interviewing skills. I also, I think about in those conversations, I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me.
Totally.
And I can sit here and you and I can sit here. In fact, this might be a good part 2 of your podcast. I
Mm-hmm.
can tell you how to build a great team and how to do all these things. But you know what really matters is that everyone else on this
Mm-hmm.
team
Mm-hmm.
doing the work. And so I do try to work in opportunities for candidates to meet and connect with other team members, to kind of feel that out, right? We're small enough that I can't have them interview everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but people get it here. They understand, we're operating at another level, right? Like we have to shift it up a gear,
Mm-hmm.
and not everybody thrives in that environment. And
Yeah.
so I try to give folks the opportunity to kind of meet and connect with other people on the team and ask the real questions that maybe they might not ask me, which does help
Mm.
as well. And we try to just paint the picture, right? And in our environment, a little different than yours, is we're pivoting quickly, we're moving fast. The way we were operating 6 months ago is different today. The responsibilities and things that we get to do are constantly evolving and changing. That is not for everyone. And I'm transparent about that. So, living in this gray, ambiguous area is not the perfect work environment for everyone. And so, trying to find people that are energized by that
Yeah.
versus fearful or just like, that's not, I want to know what I'm going to do every day.
Mm.
Very valid. They probably aren't the best fit today for what
Yeah.
we're looking for.
That's such a really important point about I think organizations, for the most part, I know I'm being very, very kind of broad strokes here, but I have found that a lot of organizations aren't good at defining what their strategy is, what their actual culture is. They talk about things
Mm-hmm.
that are aspirational, which is
Yeah.
part of communicating a vision. But I think what you're also pointing to here is that you have an accurate pulse of what your organization is, the good, the bad,
Mm-hmm.
everything in between.
Mm-hmm.
um, and it is something that we talk about here at Bella Groves, is that when we're hiring people, especially in leadership roles, we tell them, I wish I could give you a job description that's going to look the same 6 months from now, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we're a startup, we're a family business, and there are a lot
Mm-hmm.
of things that we're doing differently that there is no blueprint for. And
Right.
it that either needs to excite you,
Mm-hmm.
or if it doesn't, then this isn't maybe the best fit. And
Yeah.
so what you're talking about, what I wrote down here was candor and authenticity in the interview process of
Mm-hmm.
not just interviewing people with a set of questions saying, impress me enough and I'll give you this
Right.
job, but it
Yeah.
really is, it's a relationship rapport building moment of, here's who we are really,
Yeah.
and here's who I think you are really,
Mm-hmm.
and do we feel like
Mm-hmm.
there's a match there.
Yes, and I know you've asked me a couple times, James, for some practical
Mm-hmm.
tips. One is when you are asking for references, I always ask for personal and professional,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm.
a boss can give, or a former boss or team member can give one, assessment of someone, right? But what
Mm-hmm.
about your best friend?
Yeah.
What about your sister? They probably know you even better.
Yeah.
And
That's so
so
good.
I think sometimes that personal reference is even more valuable because they know the person,
Mm-hmm.
through all their ups and downs, and they can actually help you understand whether or not they might be a good fit.
Yeah, I think that's such a good and practical idea. Reference checks are things that a lot of people miss. I will admit I have skipped reference checks at times, and because I'm so excited, they're excited, they had a
Yeah.
great interview, I had a great interview, and you're like, let's go, let's do it,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
it doesn't work out 30 days later, and you
Yeah.
realize I never did a reference check.
Yeah.
Yeah. And probably we would have found out in that process about, it's not like you're asking people to divulge anything they wouldn't feel comfortable sharing, but
Of
I think
course. Yeah.
people just can't help but say, oh man, I love Christy. Here's all of the things that are great about her. And if you ask
Mm-hmm.
a sincere question about, tell me how she is when she's really stressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think people
Mm-hmm.
can't help but reveal honest things about, they might
Right.
say, well, most of the time Christy's great. When she's really stressed, she tends to kind of take things on herself when she should ask for help, right?
Right.
So it's not things that you're learning to discount people.
Right.
It's things that you're learning to inform. Okay, I really love this candidate, but now
Mm-hmm.
I also know if I see
Yeah.
that she's getting stressed out, her tendency is going to want to be, let me just handle it,
Yeah.
and I gotta make more offers for support.
Right. And I think being authentic and transparent in those conversations to say, look,
Mm-hmm.
we want this to be a great fit. We don't want you to come on and it not be what you thought it was going to be, and vice versa. So,
Yeah.
our goal is to get this right. And if it's not quite right, that's okay. It's no
Mm-hmm.
reflection on you. And what I'm always thinking about, I have people on my talent bench for 5 years from now where I feel
Wow.
like, okay, they would be a great fit at this stage in our business. And so it's very rarely is it never again. It's usually I'm not going to forget about you, and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
circle back when the time is right, and we'll see if things line up.
Yeah. I have a few people like that in my own professional sphere around Bella Groves that, for whatever reason, the moment that they were with us didn't work out for
Mm-hmm.
various reasons. But
Right.
I have had that thought, Christy, about, man, if we were just here, if we were at this stage, phase 2.4, and you've got it all
Mm-hmm.
mapped out, but like, man, that would really be a great milestone where this person's talents and their interests and the things
Yeah.
that they do so well, we're just not ready for this person.
Yeah.
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 There's too much gray area, and we need a
Yeah.
little bit more penciled in and colored, and this person's going to
Right.
be amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What I mean, but how can you? I've thought about this and I wondered, but have I lost that person for good? Like, is there is there a point at which they would consider coming back,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I don't know. What I'm hearing from you is that team formation is not just a linear you start, you stop, but that it's
Hmm.
our business is going to evolve. You are going to evolve as a person, and
Hmm.
maybe we have a strength of relationship that if and when those stars align again, hey, Christy, how you been? And maybe we
Well, and
reconnect.
and in between, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just because it doesn't work out doesn't mean you don't care about them.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're not concerned for them as a person and you wouldn't help them and you're. And so I think if they truly believe that in their heart and you can act as an authentic leader in that way, then they're not gone, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
going to you're going to continue a relationship with them regardless of work. And if and when that time comes, they'll know that you're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you know, I think about I've probably only been a part of a handful of what I would consider all-star teams. There
Mm-hmm.
are three that kind of immediately come to mind. And then there are others where it was more of I learned what not to do, or this
Yeah.
was a good learning experience. But it is really rare, I would say, because I've been a part of I don't know how many teams, three out of 20, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but why are there so few all-star teams that just all click and gel? What's the missing piece for so many organizations?
Yeah. Gosh, that's $1 million question.
Hmm. If
Only
we
one
figure it
team wins
out,
the Super Bowl, right? Um,
yeah, yeah.
there's so many pieces to the puzzle, right?
Hmm.
So I don't know that there's one, clear answer. I
Hmm.
think not recognizing and rewarding your people, which can be free,
Yeah.
not taking the time to sit down and build relationships with the people that you work side by side with every day, not being clear and articulate about where we're going and why we're going there and what it's going to take to get there. Um, Forcing people into boxes where they're not great and it's
Hmm.
not motivating, and maybe you're only getting a very small percentage of their potential from them. Um, I mean, the list is very long. I think
Yeah.
there's so many opportunities for the chain to break that it could be one or many of those links that kind of prohibit a team from being able to execute at the highest level.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. It is $1 million question, and if we get to the bottom of it during this episode, we'll sell this episode for
Yeah.
millions of dollars. I'll split it with you. Um, one of my working theories about this question, because I really do think about it a lot, of what was special about those three teams and how can we
Hmm.
ensure that when we put teams together they have that same magical quality.
Yeah.
And so two of those three teams I was able to put together. So I was the top leader of that team. So
Hmm.
I can point to a lot of things that I did. But the other team, the third team, I was not the leader. I was a member of that team. And it was so great to see. One thing I can say about that particular team is everybody was so talented. Like everybody on that
Hmm.
team was so talented, and I think we were able to go and do our own things. So it was a sales training team when I joined Emeritus, and now I get to tag all those people on this episode, which is great. But we were a team full of really really talented individuals, and I think our leadership did a good job of people that culturally fit together. We were
Hmm.
excited and marching in the same direction.
Hmm.
We had different skills, we had different personalities, we had different everything else about us was completely different and
Yeah.
unique, but we were all marching in the same way. We got excited by the same things, and I think
Hmm.
another part of it was that we had the ability to break off from each other, the core unit, go work with our divisions or regions or departments to ourselves, and then come back to the team. And so there
Hmm.
was this little bit of like, I get to go play in the field, and then I come back and
Yeah.
let's talk to the other people together.
Yeah.
And in our direct supervisor, who managed all of us, to his credit, he didn't over manage. I think he realized
Mm-hmm.
he had a really great thing going,
Mm-hmm.
and he formed positive relationships. But he also let the team do
Yeah.
what they wanted and what they needed, and that feeling of agency and autonomy. It was my lesson of that component of great teams came from that experience, that
Yeah.
there was trust and they let you kind of run with it.
Yeah, trust is a big thing. I think a foundation of positive relationships, right? Do
Mm-hmm.
I know who you are? Do I care about you? Um, and at the end of the day, we all just want to feel a sense of significance.
Mm-hmm.
We all want to feel like
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing brings value and it matters. And I think part of that is, there is something to, you said everyone on the team was a little bit different, very
Mm-hmm.
different, but marching in the same direction. But
Yep.
if I can celebrate that about you and I can say, James is the creative storyteller, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
celebrate that and love it every time he does it. And that adds a component to our team that we don't have from anybody else. You
Yep.
feel good and we benefit because you contribute that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think celebrating all the uniqueness that is there
Yeah.
and recognizing it, and that helps people feel good, which
Mm-hmm.
honestly matters. It helps people feel good and feel a sense of significance, which only energizes them to go do that thing more.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that helps, I think.
Yeah. I'm starting to gather some themes and a summary of our conversation. I thought we were going to have a conversation where I was going to learn about how do I put a good team together, but what
Mm,
I'm learning more is how do you keep a team? How do you keep a good
yeah.
team? And
Hmm.
maybe the biggest piece of all of this is we talk a lot in our industry about recruiting and where do we find talent, and the
Hmm.
question is who. But
Yeah.
really what we've been talking about, you and I together, is how do we keep
Yeah.
a good team? And
Hmm.
think about how often you've said, um, everything is based off of, do you have a trusting solid relationship with the people who are already there? Are you
Yeah.
celebrating people's unique talents? And so
Hmm.
maybe, there isn't a secret sauce to an interview method or a questionnaire
Yeah.
or anything, but it's more of, if you've created the ingredients already where a healthy team exists, it's so much easier to add new pieces to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when people are a part of something and they can feel that,
Hmm.
they want their people to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And I truly say, I know I mentioned it earlier, but your greatest recruitment tool is the people already there,
Right.
because really great people surround themselves with other really great people. And if they love what they're doing, they're going to want all their people to come along, as well. And
Hmm.
so that helps. Um, and yeah, it's like it attracts it once you kind of get
Yeah.
it put together. You can, if you're thoughtful about keeping it together, that can help everything, every other
Yeah.
part of your business.
Yeah. It's probably why, like, when sports teams, there's an expansion team, there's a brand new organization that's part of the league that's been here for a very long time. Generally speaking, expansion teams don't do very well because they're putting everything together from scratch, versus
Hmm.
teams that are rebuilding already tend to have a foundation of, here's our culture, here's our story, here's
Hmm.
some past championships. So there's
Hmm.
something to attach to that, people who want to be celebrated, who want to be excited. It's like, I've come back to the Lakers and I'm making it great, and,
Yeah.
versus, oh, there's this brand new team. Let's go take 100% complete chance on what this is. Now, while I say all of that, I'm recognizing you and I both have been the expansion team. You've
Yeah.
created a company that's like, oh, we didn't exist before. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
same here on my end. So for others listening who are maybe on that path right now, they're either thinking about or have started a new organization, and taking that chance of, like, I see the problem differently than everyone else, and I'm gonna
Hmm.
take a shot at this. What
Hmm.
would you say to that budding leader about how to put a good team together for the first time?
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts with yourself. And I think it starts on getting really clear on your own strengths, because if you can do that, it's a multiplier effect, right? If I can
Hmm.
get really clear on where I'm great, I'm not great at everything.
Yeah.
The day I could hire the first, additional team member to come on board with me, it was like someone lifted this
Yeah.
off my shoulders. And it was like we were five people
Yeah.
because I hired the person that was good at the things I wasn't. And
Hmm.
suddenly we could both just grow exponentially. And so I think that would be my biggest. No founder has it all, right? No founder is a great salesperson and a creative and a people leader and an operational leader and good at the financials and can
Hmm.
fundraise and can do all the things and is a technical leader and can build the thing and can market the thing. Nobody has all of those strengths.
Right.
So the more clear that you can get on your strengths, you can be thoughtful about surrounding yourself with a team of people. Maybe they're not actually team members you hire. Maybe it's, advisors in the community or mentors that you
Hmm.
have or someone you can call that can just weigh in. If you can get clear on where you're great, it will become very clear on where you need to fill those gaps.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of individual self-awareness, a lot of organizational self-awareness. And one thing that we've maybe touched on, but maybe haven't explicitly called out is the relationship between the the clarity of the vision you have for your organization
Mm-hmm.
and team formation in relation to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been a part of so many organizations where if you were to ask different members of the team, what is the general strategy of this organization? What do they believe that other organizations don't believe? Something concrete, something more than
Mm-hmm.
I love seniors.
Mm-hmm.
And most organizations can't point to those things. And I strongly believe that one of the most important things that a leader in a small organization or large can do to form a great team is to have absolute clarity about
Yeah.
here's who we are, here's what we're trying to do, here's all the things that we're not trying to do. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if you have a very clear vision of who you are, where we're going, and where we are in relation to that vision,
Mm-hmm.
then people know how to relate. That people know what character they play in that story. If you can
Mm-hmm.
actually say, here are parts of the story.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. No, you're
Yeah.
exactly right. As you were talking, James, something that popped in my mind a few minutes back when you were talking about assembling a team and
Hmm.
keeping the team together. What's interesting in a lot of my conversations that I have with, potential team members or partners, a lot of people in today's age, and maybe it's the remote work or,
Hmm.
the pandemic or whatever we went through, they're on a team, but they don't feel part of the team. And that's what they ultimately want in their job is I want to be a part of a team. I can't even tell
Hmm.
you how many times I hear that. And I think that's a differentiator. The fact that we care about it is the first step, right? But I do think with in today's day, it's easy to be on a team but not feel like you're part of it. And
Hmm.
so it's all those other things that build someone's, intrinsic satisfaction of like I'm part of something. I'm
Love
part
it.
of something
Yeah.
more than me. And if I don't wake up and show up and do my thing, people are going to notice.
Hmm.
And so that in and of itself, I think, is a differentiator. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, it's I can relate to that in so many areas of life.
Mm-hmm.
Not even now, but I mean, I'm thinking about middle school James of like
Yeah.
I was on a team or I was on this, friends group, but I wasn't in it. I didn't feel a
Yeah.
part of it. Like,
Yeah.
that sense of if you weren't there, the rest of the group would be like, "Oh man, where's James?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, we can't get
Mm-hmm.
started. James isn't here.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a really beautiful thing to anchor to and to aspire to, is that this is a team that people find belonging, rather
Mm-hmm.
than just, I've got a job and I'm on this team. It's a really
Right.
beautiful way to think about that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there are two things I'd like to make sure that I don't skip in our conversation. So one of them is scaling from small to big. It's
Mm-hmm.
uh, honestly, it's a little bit of an anxiety that I have about. I feel so wonderful and a little bit protective of this thing that we
Mm-hmm.
have here at Bella Groves. But if we are, successful in well, when we are successful putting it out into the universe,
Yeah.
there will come a point where I will not be able to protect this garage band feel, and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
have a much larger team than I personally have the capacity to maintain in terms of
Yeah.
intimate relationships. So there's
Mm-hmm.
that. And then the second part, just to cue it up for later, I love having the opportunity now to flip this interview and have you ask questions of me, because I love, as much as I love learning, I love the possibility of sharing and
Yeah.
teaching too. So those are the two pieces. Let's start with the first one. Have you
Yeah.
thought about, and do you have any anxiety about getting from small to big, and what you're going to do about that?
Yeah. So that's very interesting. So I think at the very beginning of this conversation, you mentioned that you saw my husband and co-founder Heath
Yeah.
at the conference, right?
Hmm.
And so we have lots of conversations of our growth and what's important and how do we, keep the true essence of who we are. And what's so interesting
Hmm.
is his anxiety is how do we keep the people piece as great as it is now, right?
Hmm.
Like how will we maintain our culture in a way that feels like it does today,
Hmm.
right? My anxiety is what are the revenue streams? How are we going to,
Right.
attract great people or great, partners and retain them and show
Hmm.
value and all of those things. We are each worried about the thing that is not our strength.
Yeah. Mm.
So when he asked me that question on the people piece, I'm like, doesn't even keep me up at night because we're doing it right now
Mm.
and we are identifying future leaders in our organization and we are just so thoughtful about it that it is part of our DNA. Not that we won't ever get it wrong, right? Not that there's never going to be a people problem,
Yeah.
but we are scaling in a way where people is at the center and people are the first lens, through which we look before we make any decision. And that won't change. And so I'm excited because it only creates more growth and opportunity for the people here.
Hmm.
And of course, creates more opportunity for us to make a bigger difference in the
Yeah.
world.
Man, it's so good. So what I wrote down on that was have people on your team who offset your anxiety with their confidence.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Quote
yeah.
that.
Well, it's your concept. I'm just putting it into a single sentence. Um, but I, of
Mm-hmm.
course, the things that you're saying, Christy, just makes me reflect on my team, of course. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the mark of a good conversation, a good podcast episode, a good speaker, is that it's not about maintaining interest in your story, but it's about how your story makes me think of mine.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
your story makes me think of the people on my team, and it makes me think about,
Mm-hmm.
wow, actually that does ring true for me, that the things that I'm anxious about, there are other members of the team that are like, we've got this. And there are things
Yeah.
that they're worried about that I'm like, don't worry, we've got this.
That would, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I love
and
that.
and what a mark of a good team if you offset each other's anxieties with your own confidence.
I love that. I'm going to write that
Yeah.
one down.
Yeah. We will have co-authored that one together, Christy. See, we got a
Yes.
lot of things that we're building together. And this idea of, it's kind of like when people buy small batch bourbon, or like like this is there's this feeling that when it's smaller, it's more rare. That
Mm-hmm.
there's something really special about it. And as we sit here today, Bella Groves is one location, it's one team. um, but we do aspire to have a second location.
Mm-hmm.
We want to serve all of the hill country where my business partners and I live, and so we want
Mm-hmm.
all of our neighbors and all of our communities to benefit from the thing that we're doing. But also we've set a kind of a, I don't know, a condition ahead of time that we don't want to grow to Seattle and Nashville and Chicago. We don't live there. Those aren't the communities where
Yeah.
we're going to run into you at the football game or the grocery store. And not that those people don't deserve what we're doing. I think it's just a way to protect ahead of time this feeling of ownership and responsibility
Mm-hmm.
and stewardship that um, I'm gonna pour extra into this because I'm gonna run into you somewhere.
Yeah.
and I'm responsible for you and you for me. Um,
Hmm.
so there's that element, but I do still think about, gosh, when we have a community that's an hour drive away, it's gonna feel a little different than the one that's 10 minutes away from me right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, but I love the point, Christy, of it's it's less about practical things, about what do you do when you cross this employee count, and those are really the x's and o's that a lot of people obsess over. But what I'm
Hmm.
gathering from our conversation is that when you have a really good team, you're going to meet the moment of change with those people anyway,
Yes.
so why worry about things that haven't happened yet?
Oh, well, I need to write that one down too.
Yeah, well,
But yes, you're exactly right.
maybe that's part of what makes us good leaders too, is that we're anxious about the right things.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we stay up about the right things,
Hmm.
um and our teams need us to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to the final round here, which is to reverse seats here. Anything,
Yes. Oh,
we've only had a chance to talk a few times, and by the way, we need to do it a lot more now that
I was gonna say, with your growth and our growth, we need to come back around in a year and say
totally.
what are the things that we're dealing with now,
Yeah.
and
Annual, this will become a yearbook over the
great.
course of our businesses. But I've really enjoyed this conversation, Christy. Thank you for sharing.
Likewise.
So yeah, let's reverse roles a little bit. Is there anything that you
Okay.
want to talk about? It doesn't necessarily have to be questions, but anything you want to talk about
Yeah.
yourself?
Well, oh gosh, I have. So my team knows me as a question collector.
Mm-hmm.
So I always have a list of questions for any party or meeting or whatever.
Love
They
it.
always look at me and say, "What do you got?"
Wow.
So I'm curious, James, what's your dream job?
Oh man, I'm doing it. I know that sounds cheesy and
Yeah.
corny. I am doing it. I'm literally in that moment right now where um and I think we need people who are in those moments of like, I'm doing my dream job this
Yeah.
moment. And
Hmm.
if there weren't people like that in the world, and everything was just aspirational, one day I'll get there, um
Hmm.
there's nothing to grab a hold of. I'm in my dream job right now, which is I get to uh and the reason that it's a dream job for me is that there's full creative
Hmm.
leeway here. I am There's something really informing about my life that I it's not control, it's autonomy, it's agency, it's being able to control
Hmm.
the inputs. I can't control the outputs, but I can control the inputs, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of feeling of um, peace that comes with that.
Hmm.
And we, through Bella Groves, our memory care community, we have created a place where, forget about future aspirations. Right now, in this moment, there are residents of our community that dispel misconceptions about what dementia is. There are families who, I just made a LinkedIn post this morning about it. There are families who are telling us things like, I haven't gone on vacation in years. I haven't felt safe enough to leave for even a
Yeah.
day. And one of our newest residents, we were having a 30-day um, meeting, like the 30 days after
Yeah.
her her move in, and the family told us, she's the daughter, she said, my husband and I spent all day together yesterday. It was the first time we've done that since we started caring for mom, and we just had the
Hmm.
most fun day. And
Yeah.
I thought, how can this not be my dream job, Christy, when
Yeah.
families feel that, when residents look, feel seen, when the
Hmm.
caregivers and the people who work here feel so passionate about what we're doing.
Yeah.
I can't imagine another scenario where I'm going to say my dopamine hits are a lot bigger. I mean,
Yeah.
what else is going to happen? So I do a lot of things other than that, like this podcast. I
Hmm.
speak. I put an event together in the industry, but all of those things are really the same thing. It's me
Yeah.
creating a community around the things that I love, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah. As you were talking, James, I was thinking about how you have a very cool advantage as it relates to teams, because not only are you creating your internal team of folks caring for the families, but you get to create a team with the family.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that foundational piece of relationship and authenticity, and them trusting you and your team with their best people, their family,
Mm-hmm.
is a really big deal. And so I almost think a lot of that applies, because you're kind of doing
Mm,
it in many senses.
that's so right. Yeah, we actually even talk about it in that way with families. We don't say thank you for moving in. We don't say thank you for
Yeah.
choosing us to move in. We say in our welcome letter, and we say when they arrive, thank you for inviting us to be a part of your team.
Yeah.
And it's
Hmm.
not just words, it's a mindset about you're
Hmm.
still the team captain. You've
Yeah.
invited us to be part of your team. Thank you. And here's
Yeah.
the role that we'll play. But your role, just to clarify, on any team, it's clarity of roles. What am I doing? What are you doing? What's the big picture? Um, but yeah, it's not just lip service that we feel that we are team members and partners with our families. You can
Hmm.
feel it when you walk
You can
in.
feel it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. One
Yeah.
more question for
Okay.
you. What are you looking forward to?
Oh man. What am I looking forward to? I love that your question is so open-ended. And it's not leading in any way. I would love your list of questions just for myself to ask people.
There's
Um,
hundreds.
okay. Then I'd like a segment of your list,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
maybe
I
a
got it.
full
I'll
list.
send you. I'll send you a follow up.
Okay. What am I excited about? In relation to the whole concept that I'm in my dream job right now, the thing that I'm most looking forward to is seeing what can come from arriving at this place of life harmony. And it's something that I've thought about, talked about a lot. I don't
Hmm.
um, subscribe to this notion of work life balance,
Hmm.
as if like you have 50% here, 50%
Right.
here. But, when you look in nature, when you look at the natural world around us, what example could you possibly think of that is in balance?
Yeah.
Things are more in a state of harmony. They
Hmm.
they exist in an ecosystem that all feed each other. And I think work, I think your personal life, I think your friendships, all of these things are not separate, but they all flow from
Hmm.
the sense of harmony and clarity that you have about what you're doing right now. So what I'm most looking forward to is that I think prior to the last couple of years, um, a lot of people in this profession of senior living, this concept of caregiver burnout, it
Hmm.
exists for professionals too. It's
Yeah.
not just family members who are caring for a loved one. This compassion
Hmm.
fatigue and caregiver burnout it's the calcified like time elapsed of you're pouring yourself into something that
Hmm.
will end.
Hmm.
Every relationship that we have now, every resident, we won't know them in
Hmm.
whatever timeline. There are
Hmm.
families who started with us at when we first opened doors that I don't get to see them every day anymore.
Yeah.
And so I'm learning a lot about the beauty of things that'll go away. That
Yeah.
we're creating things that are not to keep but to just experience. And I think
Hmm.
that's really poetic, and I love this moment of life. So I'm looking forward to, now that I'm on the other side of burnout, I'm on the other side of
Yeah.
not knowing where my passions and talents are going to go. But I feel like I'm in my element really for maybe the first real time. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to a lot of unknowns. What's going to come from this place of having that sense of harmony, and what can come
Hmm.
from it? And you'll probably relate to this too. The thing that I'm most looking forward to is studying it. Then it's like,
Yeah.
okay, so this thing happened. How do we reverse engineer this and create it for other people
Yeah.
too? Right? I
Hmm.
bet I don't know you very well, Christy, but I have a feeling your brain naturally went to that place too of like, yeah, once I figure it out,
Hmm.
now I want to understand it and I want to create it for other people.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, I love your answer, James. And I think what a gift to have that clarity. I think a
Mm,
lot of people spend their whole lives trying to figure out, how do I get that balance? How do I get in a
hmm.
position where, I'm thriving and I'm giving back to the world all the things that I have to give. And so kudos to you. And, that's a really special place to be in. And I'm sure your team and the families that you serve can feel that every day when you come to work.
Yeah, it didn't start that way. I'll say that. When you start a business, it's like having a baby. You're just you're a ball of nerves. You're like, am I doing this right?
Who left me with this? Yeah.
Who let me out of the hospital with this? Who did my reference checks, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, a lot of fears and challenge and all of those things in the beginning of starting a business, just like being a parent for the first time.
Yeah.
But you do figure it out. You do get a sense of confidence. You're like, okay, now let's see what we can do with this.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. So we should come back annually. I'm just going to put it on your calendar.
Perfect.
1 year from today, just to do our next recording. I really enjoyed this conversation, Christie. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom. This was a lot of fun.
Likewise, James. Appreciate the opportunity. Obviously, you've hit a passion of mine. So any chance I have to talk about what I love is, the time just flew by. So thank you for what you're doing, not only in your community, but for our industry. I think it's going to propel us forward, and we'll all be better for it. So appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, we're going to go ahead and end our episode here with Christie. Please connect with her. We'll put a few things in the show notes. We'll link to her company, seniorcarefinder.com. Okay. And your LinkedIn profile. Are there any other ways that we can have our listeners connect with you, Christie?
Yeah, LinkedIn's easy to connect with me directly. And then we're on all the social platforms, Senior Care Finder. You'll find us anywhere.
Yeah. And then are you on the speaker circuit in senior living?
Yep. So I have spoken at a number of conferences. Happy to continue to speak, whether it's on the consumer experience and consumer insights of what someone goes through when navigating their search, or building high-performing teams, and really the talent side of things. Happy to share whatever I have to offer if that interests anyone listening.
Awesome. I hope I get to see you in person. I met Keith, and now we got to do it in person too. So awesome, Christie. Have an awesome day.
Take care. Thanks, James.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Level Up Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast and its YouTube channel. Better yet, share it with someone you know who is on their own leadership development journey. I hope you'll be back for the next episode of Level Up. But until then, I hope that you are leading well, and remember that you are living your legacy today. So, make it a good one.